All right. Today's discussion, how to use RPE, an acronym for rate of perceived exertion. We're going to discuss RPE from two different angles, right? Because we could use RPE traditionally to improve strength, performance, whatever it may be, and we can also use it to reduce or navigate pain. So I'm going to come at RPE from both angles because many of us are doing it for both, or at the very least, using RPE to create a performance gain while at the very least preventing any sort of pain or irritation from popping up. So, first, we're going to talk about some frustrations that come up around training intensity, progressive overload, even RPE itself. Okay. So, first one is if the weight isn't going up, I must not be improving, right? Many of y'all have spoken on this in the group chat, have messaged me about this. Maybe you haven't spoken on it, but I know you're definitely dealing with it. And the issue of like, you know, I'm getting stronger, numbers are going up, I'm adding weight or I'm adding reps, and then eventually that weight doesn't go up anymore, right? Or you had a bad week and you didn't progress in the same way that you progressed the week before. People get frustrated. If I'm not always making visible strength gains, then that means you know, I'm not I'm not making any gains. Something's going wrong. I'm losing my gains. I'm losing progress. And one of the things we'll talk about around RPE is that it kind of helps you zoom out, right? Move away from being so attracted to, so connected to the weight on the bar or the number of reps that you've done and actually just kind of look at how things feel, how things have progressed over the course of many weeks or many months. So I don't want RPE to be this thing that prevents you from paying attention to the weight. It's important. I want it to be a thing that is in addition to the weight you use, the reps you do, and helps you, I guess we could say, look at things from a more global perspective across time, not just across, two different sessions. The frustration that is popping up frequently is around pushing harder and like not seeing the response of pushing harder, right? So I keep trying to push harder, but I end up flaring up or, feeling worse. And the analogy is kind of like trying to drive faster and flip faster, put the pedal to the metal, really drive into that gas pedal, and your car is still like moving slower, right? It's not getting faster. If anything, the engine is starting to smoke. It could be because your oil is low. It could be because something's wrong with the transmission, but you just keep on, you keep on pushing. It's not working, me pushing this hard, so I'm just going to push even harder instead of assuming like maybe something under the hood isn't working, right? So we'll talk about how RPE allows us to understand what's going on with recovery, stress, pain sensitivity, because you really just can't outlift that stuff. I know we've talked about it many times, but you're never going to outlift shitty sleep, um, and work stress and family stress. It's just not going to happen. If anything, you're just going to add to the nonsense that you're already dealing with, the chaos. Final frustration. My form breaks down at higher weights, but going lighter feels like a waste of time. I really wanted to use the quote, well, I can do 35 pounds for 10 reps, so I'm gonna. And that is by a wise woman by the name of Courtney Parson. And but I think this quote speaks to it a little differently, right? Like I can go heavier or I want to go heavier because when I go lighter, it feels like I'm not pushing myself enough. And Courtney's just one of all of us. I do the same thing where you're just trying to go heavier, even if your mind muscle connection's not dialed in, even if something was bothering you at 100 pounds, but you still went up to 150 pounds. And I'm taking bothering you more than just like the acceptable amount of discomfort that we all uniquely have accepted in our own journey. So, RPE is going to help solve that, which we'll talk about, giving you a better focus on quality and intent instead of just lifting heavier with, sloppy form like homeboy here building his tower with less than ideal foundation that's probably going to fall eventually here. So, effectively using RPE in your training, right? Here's what I hope to solve for you, I hope to give you or bring you closer to as we go through this discussion. One, trading hard without overdoing it, right? Finding the optimal level of hard work, of intensity. And I mean overdoing it, not just like causing yourself to fail that set that day, but overdoing it across time, right? Many of us, we run into trouble chronically. I feel fine after I do that 10 RPE set. So why don't I just do that next week and next week and the week after that and week after that? And then eventually it starts catching up with us. And I get messages that say, my elbow's a little cranky or my lower back's been bothering me, not really sure why. And I fall into the trap too of being like, well, send me a video, let me look at your form, right? Or, maybe it's just we've been doing back squats for too long. It's like, or we've just been doing back squats too hard for too long, right? And that could be coming from a misinterpretation of the RPE or we can call it like a misprescription of the RPE too. So I hope that many of you leave this workshop with a better ability to be autonomous and actually challenge me sometimes around the use of RPE and the use of weight prescriptions that we can be effective together, not just like you following my rules. That's not the intent here, right? Two, let go of the pressure of needing to chase numbers every single week. Listen, chasing numbers is good. Chasing that extra 5 pounds, those extra 2 reps, like that is at the heart of what drives fitness gains. That is at the heart of why many of us do fitness to look cool, look good, but also because we like to have these wins. Like that's a driving force. We need that. We just need to know how to do so tactfully, productively. Third, staying consistent without setbacks or burnout. The big thing here is push, 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 push. You get burnt out, you get frustrated, you pushed quicker than you could adapt, and that just means gains are slower, or it means you get hurt, and then you get burnt out and you don't want to do it anymore. And the biggest driver of gains, regardless of how much weight or how much reps you use, is being consistent, being in there week after week, year after year. If we lose consistency, we lose the game, no matter how awesome the gains were, right? Four, see progress beyond just the barbell. We're talking about control, mind muscle connection, coordination, rhythm, flow, ability to move in multiple different ways beyond just how much is on that barbell or on the dumbbell or kettlebell. Five, rebuilding trust after pain or setbacks. I hope many of you have noticed that RPE gives you a comfortable boundary that you can feel satisfied when you go too light. And you can also feel safe when you're going heavy because Tyler, my coach, told me to do 7 RPE. He thinks it's not going to hurt me. Then I'm just going to do that and I feel safer, right? Six, adjust training on tough days without losing momentum. Life gets in your way, poor sleep, stress from job or job changes. You can get in the gym, get it done, regardless of how much effort you can put in, or rather, regardless of how much weight is on the bar, because some weeks RPE is going to change based on, what's going on in life. So before we move on, I'm going to ask, you can speak it, you can type it, whatever you would like to do. I want to know some frustrations that have come up for you around progressive overload, RPE, training intensity, balancing that with discomfort, how to know what weight to choose based on the RPE that's popped up. Any frustrations that have come up for you that I haven't touched on, let's hear it.
I think for me, it's just weight selection, especially when it's a
Mm.
new and it says RPE 7 or 8, and then I pick up a weight and I blast through to 8, and I'm like, okay, that was way too light, and then have to kind of figure out where that starting weight is at an RPE of 8 when I have 12 to do. Does
Oh
that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah, 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 yeah. It does make sense. So effectively, you're saying like basically not getting the RPE correct,
Right.
and that creates a problem of like, well, kind of like a wasted set or wasted time.
Well, not knowing like
Yeah,
where um it does make it, a little bit longer because I've now done 2 sets where, my weight's just not right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So this is something that I could probably front load that knowledge to people when I bring them on first is like I bake in the assumption that the first week of every training phase is effectively a deload week or a reload week, or we can call it like an acclimation week. Like that's kind of baked into the thought process there. That's first off, right? So it's not really wasted time, at least in my brain.
Right.
Second, and this is not right at you, Nicole, but we're going to use you. I know most of the other people listening to this or on the call right now feel the same way about like, like that wasn't right. I kind of wasted time. What if there was no RPE and I just had 3 sets of 10 of dumbbell bench press? You walked into the gym and you picked a weight that felt too easy, but then you just picked up a heavier weight.
Yeah. I mean, I consistently do that. Like I'm always trying to get a heavier next step.
Yeah.
Automatically going to do that. If I started at like 30, I'm going to try for 32 and a half, and then I'm going to try for 35, and then I'm just going to keep going until maybe I couldn't get 8 or I
Right.
failed at
But
7.
I think what he's saying is if he just did 3 sets of 10, you'd have to
You'd still do that.
figure it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So something I hope is maybe comforting for you is that RPE will never be able to solve the bottom end of the weight selection scale. Like if it's a 7 RPE, an 8 RPE, a 10 RPE, there was always going to be a high likelihood that you undershoot it and you work your way up. What I hope that RPE prevents for you specifically in this scenario and many's is as you continue to build, you stop sooner than you would have without the RPE.
Got it.
So if you, let's say an example of like undershooting 8 RPE, 3 sets of 10, dumbbell bench press at 8 RPE. Cool. Well, I used the 20s and that was too light. All right, I used the 25s, that was too light. 30s, that was difficult, but I can do more. 35s, I only was able to do 10 reps.
Right.
Like that was an inappropriate finish to the progression. Like you should have stopped sooner than that. And I hope RPE tells you like, all right, the 25s where you're able to, it was difficult, that's where you stop. But
Okay.
most of us innocently, if I can do more reps, I should have gone heavier. And I'm here. This basically the next 30 minutes is basically about like, no, you don't have to go heavier just because you can do more reps.
Okay.
So we won't solve the trial and error random warm up set problem. That will always be there.
I
I
just use
still do
it,
it.
I just use this as more warm up. If I grab a set of dumbbells and that's supposed to be at a 7 and it's a 5, that's just a warm up for me. I just grab another
Yeah.
set.
The other thing too, for anyone who feels like they're pretty inaccurate with their weight selections, you just get better you get better in time. And it's not always just like global training each time. It's just like maybe time of doing that specific exercise. Okay. Training progress is not about pushing harder. It's about knowing when and how to push to keep things moving forward. Right? So most people treat intensity like a light switch, right? Like I'm either training intensely or I'm not. And that often leads to people getting burnt out, flaring up, just reaching plateaus. But ideally, to stay safe, to do this for the long term, to get lasting progress, we want to treat intensity like a thermostat, right? Something that you can dial up or dial down. I thought an actual picture of a thermostat was super boring, so I use a thermometer. Okay. I didn't misinterpret the name thermostat, by the way. We want to be able to dial it and not just say like some arbitrary threshold is intense and below that is not intense. It's going to change based on the exercise, based on the training phase, based on the day or the week. I know I've framed RPE from a place of like this is how you keep yourself training hard and staying safe when life gets in the way, all that good stuff. But it's also like there are certain training phases, certain exercises during the session that should not be at a 10 RPE, let alone an 8 RPE. And it's helpful if you can understand like the acceptable level of intensity, even if it's not what's like, within your kind of developed threshold or categories, right? So we want to learn how to control the dial so you can stay in that sweet spot, right? And that sweet spot is enough intensity to grow, but not enough intensity to break. And I don't love the term break, but I thought it was clever because I could do all these cool words with it. Breaking down, yes, like having pain, something getting hurt, or breaking consistency because you just get too burnt out. I had a client message me about a month ago and say that she was like borderline anxious, having anxiety, crying about going into the rest of her session or even going into that session that day because she was like nervous to go heavy and not like I'm going to hurt myself. She was just like anticipating the work, the hard work, the intensity. And that's like not a good place to be. That's when you know that you're asking too much of yourself. You expect yourself to do too much, or you've already been, right? So then you get burnt out and you stop. Breaking confidence in your ability to do this thing right. If you keep going too hard and putting yourself in a hole, you're going to lose confidence in your own independence. Then you're going to be stuck needing someone to help you forever. And then breaking away from the plan, right? Part of what I believe sits at the crux of mental fortitude, which is an important part of a healthy training plan, is not just being strong-willed. It's not just, not getting emotional when things go wrong. It's also like doing what you said you were going to do, right? Or doing what you've committed to do, doing what you've asked someone to tell you to do. That's part of like being an adult as well, right? So sticking to the plan, sacrificing the pleasure of immediate gratitude of going heavier and catching that little win might serve you better in the long run if you don't always chase that. Okay. So what is RPE for those of you that are not super familiar? It's a scale, 1 to 10, maybe even 0 to 10 scale. We use that scale to measure how hard you went, right? So how hard the set feels, how much effort you put forth, how much fatigue you felt at the end of the set, how close you were to failure. It measures all of those things and allows you to kind of gauge how you felt that day based on how you felt in the past. It's kind of like a moving scale a little bit over time. And it's important because not every session is going to be the same. Things are going to get in your way and make you work harder, even with lighter weight, because of things like sleep, stress, soreness, all that. And then RPE allows you to push, right? It allows you to push hard and feel comfortable about having reps left over because you know that the literature, science literally tells us you don't have to go to failure every single time. We just need to be close enough to it. So many of you see most of your training exercises somewhere between 7 to 8 RPE. That's in that hard, challenging scenario. RPE basically correlates to how many reps are in reserve. So a 10 out of 10 RPE means you have nothing left. No time left for the plank, no reps left for the bench press. You can't get another pull-up, right? 9 RPE means you have 1 rep left in the sorry, Aaron, that made me laugh. Aaron said, also because I swear gravity changes between my home gym and the rec center gym. No, no one's looking at you. It's darker, it's quieter in your basement. It's just not as exciting. You get clinically weaker when you're alone. Anyway, 9 RPE is close to max effort, but you have a rep left, right? And so on and so forth. Literature tells us that we make great adaptation. We grow muscle, our nervous system gets better, we make the gains somewhere around 7 to 8 RPE. If you did 7 to 8 RPE with every single exercise, every single session for the rest of eternity, you would make more gains than 99% of the population. And mainly because you're consistently training hard enough and it's consistent. Whereas most people, they push too hard, they fall back. They push too hard, they get bored. They push too hard, they get burnt out, right? 7 to 8 RPE is fine. Here's the thing. If you trained at a 6 RPE, which is like 4+ reps left, it's effectively the lowest RPE we ever really talk about in the industry. You would still make gains over time. One thing I want you to take away from here is RPE, again, even though it's a scale, most people they start to take that scale and turn it into a switch and say, anything below an 8, I'm not making gains. No, it's just the speed of how much gains you're making. A 6 RPE might take 2 months longer than an 8 RPE. It's still gains though, right? Moving on. So, how do we use RPE in real life? First one on the list is going to be adjusting RPE based on the session. Okay. So, if you walk into the gym and you feel great, one option is to actually go to a heavier RPE or a more intense RPE than what is prescribed, and vice versa if you feel not so great. Disclaimer before I go into this, okay, is this is the one that I don't recommend doing, especially when you're paying another human being to tell you what RPE to do. Don't recommend choosing your own RPE based on how you feel that day. What we want to do is allow RPE to keep us feeling confident and content when the weight changes. So we'll talk about that version next, the more recommended version. But let's say you walk in on any given day, you're feeling pretty average, right? Energy is average, not a super stressful day, nothing's really super painful. Well, then it would be recommended that you train somewhere around a 7 to 8 RPE, right? You train where you have like 2 to 3 reps left for most exercises, right? Focus on control, good technique, movement quality is the priority while still training hard enough. Let's say that you're having a particularly good day, right? You've been hanging out at the beach all day, you've got a lot of energy, you're training the next morning. All right, cool. Let's crank it up to a 9 RPE, right? High 8, 9 RPE. Hit a nice heavy top step, back off a little bit. Maybe test something if you're feeling good. Not every damn exercise of the session, but maybe you push something a little harder because you have the energy. You're feeling great. You've got gas in the tank. On the other end, maybe you're having a bad day. You slept like crap over the weekend. You have stress from work. You got in an argument with your friend or your partner. You're sore. So you drop the RPE down to 6 or 7, right? And we can take these and basically do the same thing with pain. Your pain's been stubborn the last couple of days. It's really throbbing. It's keeping you up at night. Like we should probably train more down to a 6 or 7 RPE. You're having consistently low pain, not one random fluke day of low pain. Maybe we try pushing up into the high 8s, 9s RPEs. Okay. This is one option of actually moving RPE based on the day. The other option, highly recommended option of the two, is adjusting the weight. This is why we use RPE, is because some days the weight is going to feel heavier than other days. And as long as you're training at the right intensity, you will make gains, right? Because if you scale out and zoom out, it's going to end up looking like the slow upward trajectory that we wanted to make in the first place. So option two, once again, the more recommended option is to go with a, hey yo, changing intensity, keeping RPE the same, or changing the weight based on how you feel. Average day, sleep was decent, stress was moderate, your body's feeling okay, nothing like notable. You're not feeling particularly strong or fast or powerful. You're also not feeling particularly fatigued or sore. Then, the RPE is likely going to be the same or a little bit heavier than last week. Let's say you're having a really good day, high energy, well recovered, body feel great, ate a massive steak the night before. Well, then the same RPE, right, 8 RPE, might be heavier than last week because you've just got more to give, and that's okay. But the next week, when you have less to give because you're sore, you're stressed, you haven't been sleeping well, the pain is more intense, that same RPE might be less weight. And this is where folks get frustrated in this red light zone. I'm not feeling good, the weight feels super, super heavy. So that means I need to like ignore how it feels and just go based off of what I did last week because if I don't move the numbers up, then I'm not making the gains and I wasted my time, right? If most days ended up in a yellow, you're going to be in a really, really good spot. So based on our programming and what I have written for y'all, I would recommend that you use this red light, yellow light, green light type of system. You walk into the gym, Tyler has you doing goblet squats at an 8 RPE, and you're like, oh, today's a green light day. Cool. Well, then I would assume 8 RPE is going to be heavier than last week's 8 RPE. If you walk into the gym and you're like, man, feeling all right, not super motivated, nothing hurts. It's just another day, then be okay with doing the same weight as last week, right? It's okay if certain weeks are a little bit lighter, if not the same exact weight. Any questions, comments, or concerns so far? Anyone have questions on what we've chatted about?
Nope.
No? Feeling good? Okay. How does RPE improve performance? We've talked about it a lot, but I wanted to have a good kind of spot for all of you to look back on if needed, right? It allows you to adjust your daily readiness or adjust to readiness, depending on how ready you are that day. Instead of being like, today's a wash or I'm ignoring everything, you can adjust based on the readiness, which allows you to stay consistent, which is going to allow you to do this thing for the long haul, right? And sustainably overload across many, many weeks or many months. It's also hopefully making many of you care a little bit more about quality reps, quality technique, good mind muscle connection than just the weight on the bar. And all of those things serve navigation of pain, right? Like I said earlier, RPE is a really nice guardrail, a really nice safety net when you're in pain because it keeps you under your pain threshold or under it most frequently. It keeps you having progress, but not super fast progress that causes the engine to blow up. And it teaches you to respect the nervous system, right? Those alarms that the body is telling you, sometimes you got to listen, you got to back off so that your nervous system starts to trust you again. And you have confidence in yourself to make good decisions. So, the infinite progress myth will finish with this, right? The infinite progress myth is that progressive overload is just going to go on forever. Well, I've had many of you get upset when you don't make those 5 pound gains every single week. And I hear that. Across 4 weeks, that's 20 pounds in a month. That's doable. But if you extrapolate 5 pound gains across 26 weeks, anybody know how much weight that is? Just cut it in half.
1,300, 130.
Yes, 130. You were there. I know what you were doing, where your brain was going. Yeah, 130 pounds in a half a year. That's 260 pounds a year. That's like not a thing. That's not really like doable. And it doesn't make sense. Right? For most lifts, for most people, you're not going to gain 260 pounds on one lift in a year. If that is like so obviously unrealistic, then why do we expect 1/12 of that to be the standard? It doesn't have to be, because at some point out of those 12 months, if 260 pounds is unrealistic, that means at some point you don't make the gains every single week. So it might be the month you're in now, it might be the following month, but at some point things are going to slow down because literally our genetics don't support those types of gains, right? So a more realistic, ideal, rather just realistic type of weight increase is what we see here in the green, right? It slowly goes up. Maybe it's a 5 pound jump every week for a little while because it's a new movement, but eventually it starts to mellow out. Maybe you have a bad week and then you make some gains, another slow week, bad week, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of a half a year, you're lifting 30 pounds more than you were for the same rep range, right? You might be lifting more for less rep range, but this is a realistic type of gain. 30 pounds in 6 months. Sorry to tell you, but most of y'all who have been training for more than a year, things get slower, like a lot slower, right? I don't think that I'm the precedent of fitness, but I've been lifting for a long time. I put on 10 pounds on my deadlift in 12 months, only 10 pounds. Maybe I don't train right, but I think I'm pretty good at like training average. And I feel like that's an average kind of gains, right? So some of you have a pretty good scope on how quickly the gains should happen. Some of you um, could have used this reminder. So that is pretty much it for RPE. It's quite simple when you back out and look at it all together. But I'm going to open it up for some questions if anyone has questions. And if you're watching the recording, if you have a question based on something we discussed, I urge you to drop the question in the Circle community or in Telegram. Circle's preferred because we can kind of answer it in more length. But if you want to drop it in Telegram, the public asking questions are ideal because everyone can be validated by also having that question and can learn from the answer. So, any of y'all here have any questions?
Any questions?
I think the hardest thing for me with RPE is being afraid of having to back down, like to the opposite of what Nicole said, right? Which is like you're like, oh, it's RPE 7 or 8, okay, and you pick up something, you're like, okay, I can do 3 reps at that, and you want me to do 12, like that's bananas. But I picked up this weight, so this is what we're doing, right? And instead going, all right, no, we're gonna try something. We're gonna try something different.
Yeah.
Slightly less embarrassing at home than in at the public gym, but so
Yeah.
that's like the hardest one for me when or like you're like really you really want it to be a week that you can do the same as last week if not a little bit more and you're just like nope and it's getting out of that mindset of I have to do this because this is what I picked up first.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that. I feel that. Here's a so the first problem you mentioned of like just picking up something that was way too heavy, regardless of your expectations, I don't really have a good like way of going about it. It's just like no one really cares. Um, and if it was three pretty decent reps or even two and a half pretty decent reps, well, you got a nice little like central nervous system excitement, and you're going to lift the lighter weight even better because you over challenged your system for a few reps. The other one, the like you know, I I I picked up the weight in part because automatic autopilot, but also because I expect myself to be able to lift that weight this week. Lifting the weight that you lifted last week has minimal to no value if it wasn't controlled, and especially if it hurt. Said differently, lifting the weight that you were supposed to lift last week, especially if it was too hard or even if it hurt, is certainly going to create gains. You're certainly going to ask the muscles to grow, but you're also like asking other things to change in an inappropriate way. You're asking your nervous system to create compensations or dig in to movement compensations or movement faults and things like that. And like, sure, you did it, but you have to remind yourself of like at what cost. You know what I mean? You could think about it like if I said I wanted to run a marathon tomorrow and I got 5 miles into the marathon and I couldn't run anymore, I could walk the rest of the marathon just to be able to say I finished the marathon. But like for what? Like when you put it in that kind of example, you're like, yeah, you're foolish. Okay, well, it's like the analogy for all the other examples. Yeah. What were you gonna say, Brian?
I put weights back all the time. I mean, I'm in a little bit of a different phase of my training right now because I had that injury, so kind of figuring things out again. But I was looking at my RP last week, and the same scenario. It was shoulder press. I did 60 pounds on my left the week before, and it was heavy as shit, and I couldn't explain it. I was just like, screw it, I just put it back and grabbed a 55. I mean, it is what it is. But I mean, I agree. You gotta listen. You gotta do what's right, or you're just gonna be counterproductive. And believe me, trust me, it took me a long time to get here, and Tyler can attest to that. I mean, we've had these
Yeah.
conversations for years,
Yes, we have.
but and I can look at the years worth of working out and training and see that it does actually work out in the end if you do all these things and leave your ego at the door and kind of follow the program. But just my 2 cents.
What I don't want to happen is RPE to actually mess with you in the same way that the weights were messing with you, right? So what we see, the other end of this is when people choose too heavy of a weight, too heavy based on the RPE, and they do their first set and it's a 10 RPE. What will happen is people will feel like a failure because they did a 10 RPE and Tyler said to do an 8 RPE. And it's like the existence of doing a 10 RPE is not automatically injurious. Like you're not going to hurt yourself just because you did it. It's not a fail just because you did it. What I want to prevent is from it happening as the standard, right? So it's needed. So Aaron, in your example, if you do three and it was prescribed to do 12, chalk it up as a warm-up set. But if you do 12 at failure and it was supposed to be a 7 or 8 RPE, count it. Like, you did it. But like acknowledge that it wasn't the prescribed RPE and back off. And then the following week, don't feel like you need to start at that weight you started at the week before because it was objectively inappropriate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually I did that on Monday with the push-ups because you were like, all right, 2 seconds down, elevated, your elevation's gonna might have to change. And on my third set, I was like, I could do the same elevation I did for my second set, but it's not gonna be an RPE of 8.
Yeah. Right.
We're gonna go
Right.
elevate a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And that's another good point is like, Charlie, your job. My dog is licking the kettlebell right now. He's licking. It's the 106, so I'm proud of him. But
You're boring our dogs to
yeah,
death.
dude, we're talking about you. Oh, they're lounging.
It's
So uh, this is not entirely your job, right? And I can help guide folks, but sometimes adjusting RPE doesn't have to just mean the weight. It might mean less range of motion. It might mean less reps. You know, it's going to depend on the movement, but at the end of the day, going outside of the guidelines of the RPE is okay and actually like kind of needed when it's tactfully done, when it's done at the end of a 4 or 5, 6 week cycle, when it's after a couple of weeks of you feeling good and you're like, oh, whatever. Maybe even the first week of a cycle when you're trying to just test the waters and you end up hitting a 10 RPE and you're like, okay, now I know exactly where 8 RPE is because I know what failure feels like. Like the biggest thing I'm trying to prevent here is failure being the standard, being the expectation as the thing that's needed to create adaptation. Anything less than that, you're not going to need me for as long as you thought you did. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just try to use it as a guide. Like if I go back and look at like a set of shoulder press and the reps and thinking in my head what the RP is, just for me anyway, as long as I'm close and it all kind of makes sense. If it was maybe it was ended up being a 9, it should have been an 8, or as long as they're close and it's a general guideline, it's kind of how I use it.
Yep.
Try not to overthink it. What's so
Yeah.
funny?
I don't want to make overthinkers. I don't want to like add another problem for folks.
Yeah.
What you say in here?
Yeah, she's agreeing with me.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Who else? Anyone got questions?
I have a question.
Question, ask away.
So this week, I've noticed that like a lot of the time my RPE is like 1 or 2, but my pain is like a 3 out of 10. So I'm like obviously not increasing the weight because then I know my pain would go higher.
Mhm.
Um, I'm assuming in that situation you just kind of suck it up with the low RPE. Okay.
Pain always trumps RPE. Let's make sense of that, right? First of all, at the end of the day, we're doing this fitness thing for like health. So if we're getting stronger, we're getting more aesthetic, we're getting more mobile, we're getting whatever, in light of being in pain, that's not health. I know you know that, but I'm saying it for everyone. Second, RPE speaks more to the global system. Sure, it speaks to how much burn you feel in your quads, right? But we're looking more at not just the muscles, but the nervous system, which means the tendon in your blank might not match the threshold of your biceps tendon, might not match the threshold of your nervous system. And unfortunately, we have to listen to the biceps threshold in order to allow it to adapt appropriately without continuing to piss it off. Because just like training load, if we train to our nervous system's threshold, our body's threshold every single week, if we push that threshold, you do as much working out as you could possibly do every week, you're going to get burnt out. That is just a non-pain example or equivalent to training at your biceps threshold every week and like creating more discomfort. So long-winded way of saying if your pain ever holds back your RPE lower than the prescribed RPE, Courtney, this is not at you. I'm just going to say this so it really hits home for everyone. This is the moment when you have to be an adult and be okay with not training heavy. And I say that for everyone, not just you. And you did that this week. You were like, this was literally a 1 RPE. And I'm like, yeah, it's a corrective exercise at this point. That's just kind of where we are. So, good job being an adult.
Thanks.
Good question. Is that it? Everyone feeling good?
Yep.
Yep. Cool. I'm going to drop a message in the group chat asking for requests of future topics. I have many, but I don't want to just blab on about things that I think everyone needs if it's not what everyone thinks they need. So thank you.
Is there really a new Tyler and Courtney?